The rain falls without mercy on the wooden planks of Kyoto's back alleys. It is autumn 1882, and the city smells of wet wood, coal smoke, and something else. Human sweat mixed with cheap perfume. The narrow street is barely wide enough for two people to pass, and in a corner room above a sake shop, a girl named Tomoe sits on a thin mat, shivering. She is 14 years old. Her hair, once long and black like her mother's, lies in dark heaps on the floor around her. The scissors in the older woman's weathered hands move with brutal efficiency, cutting away not just her hair, but the last visible remnant of who she was 3 days ago, a farmer's daughter from a mountain village. The barber does not speak. She never speaks during this ritual. The sound is only the click, click, click of the blades, the soft falling of Tomoe's hair, and the girl's shallow breathing. Through the thin paper walls, she hears the sounds of the Geisha district awakening. Men's voices growing louder as sake fills their stomachs, the rhythmic thud of a shamisen being tuned, a woman's laugh that cuts off abruptly as if someone twisted a knife. Tomoe has been here for 72 hours. She has not eaten a full meal. She has not slept more than 2 hours at a time, and she will not leave this room, this city, or this life for the next 5 years, if she survives that long. Her mother sold her, not with cruelty in her voice, but with resignation. "This is a better life than the farm," her mother had said, pressing a small cloth into her daughter's palm. "You will learn music, you will dance, you will be respected." What her mother did not say, because she did not know, or chose not to know, was that Tomoe's apprenticeship had already been bought and paid for in debt. Her family owed money. Tomoe had become the collateral. The barber finishes. Tomoe's head is now short and uneven, and when she catches her reflection in the small mirror, she does not recognize the face looking back. The older woman, whose name is Yuki, finally speaks. "You cry, they beat you harder," she says, her voice empty of emotion. "You run, they break your legs. You speak without permission, they take your food. Do you understand?" Tomoe nods silently. She understands nothing, and everything is now terrifyingly clear. This moment, this girl on a wooden floor with her hair scattered like fallen leaves, is not the beginning of an elegant artistic career. It is the beginning of a carefully constructed system designed to extract every ounce of labor, obedience, and beauty from a child's body and mind before discarding what remains. What is about to unfold over the next 5 years is not myth, not exaggeration, and not a story told by outsiders looking in. It is documented history, and Tomoe's story is one of thousands. Before you dismiss this as the invention of a historical dramatist or the fantasy of a novelist, you need to understand something. This is not speculation. The story of Tomoe, and the thousands like her, is documented in meticulous detail across 2 centuries of Japanese records. What you are about to hear comes from an archive of evidence that has survived into our present day, waiting to be read by those willing to look. The sources are numerous and specific. Japanese court records from the Edo and Meiji periods contain lists of girls contracted to geisha houses, along with their prices, debt amounts, and expected service terms. We have letters written by mothers to their daughters, letters that were never sent and perhaps never meant to be. We have testimonies from women who escaped or aged out of the system and later recounted their experiences to researchers and journalists. We have architectural records showing the layout of geisha houses, including the locked rooms where young trainees were confined. Buddhist temple records document the religious framework used to justify the system. We possess laws passed by regional governments that explicitly regulated the age at which girls could be apprenticed and the conditions they could be forced to endure. American and European travelers in Japan during the late 1800s wrote shocked accounts of what they witnessed in the geisha districts, accounts that scandalized their home countries but changed almost nothing in Japan itself. Perhaps most damning are the medical and police records. Doctors who examined young geishas noted repeated injuries, signs of abuse, malnutrition, and infections. Police raids on illegal geisha houses in the early 1900s produced documented accounts of the conditions inside. Japanese sociologists and reformers in the early 20th century conducted interviews with former geishas and published their findings. Books that were sometimes suppressed or forgotten, but which survived in university archives. The deeper documentation lies in the survival itself. Thousands of women lived through this system. Some left autobiographies. Others were interviewed in the 1950s and 1960s, when Japan was confronting its imperial past. Their voices are preserved in recorded interviews, newspaper articles, and academic dissertations. The pattern is consistent across different regions, different decades, and different geisha houses. When multiple independent sources tell the same story, the same details about confinement, the same descriptions of punishment, the same age of entry, history becomes certainty. This was not chaos or the action of a few cruel individuals. This was policy, systematic, legal, sanctioned by government, enabled by poverty, and justified by the very culture that claimed to venerate beauty and artistic refinement. What follows is not a warning from distant history. It is a portrait of how civilization can be built on the suffering of the most vulnerable, hidden behind silk, makeup, and the carefully constructed myth of the geisha as artist rather than as enslaved child. You cannot understand the cruelty without understanding the machine that created it. The system that trapped Tomoe did not emerge from sadism alone. It emerged from economics, law, and a carefully constructed philosophy about gender, beauty, and obligation. And it was, by the standards of its time and place, entirely respectable. Begin with poverty. During the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, and into the Meiji period, 1868 to 1912, rural Japan was characterized by periodic famines, failed harvests, and families drowning in debt. A family with too many daughters and not enough land faced an impossible choice: watch your children starve or sell them. The system that emerged to handle this tragic arithmetic was not secret. It was formalized. There existed legal contracts, called indenture agreements, that specified exactly how much a girl would cost, how long her service would last, what she would be forced to do, and what her family would receive in return. Let us place ourselves in the house of a debt-ridden farmer in 1875. His name is Jiro. He has 2 daughters and no way to feed them through the winter. A representative from a geisha house in the nearest city arrives, a woman called an okiya mama, or house mother. She is not crude about the transaction. She speaks of opportunity and training and respectability. She shows Jiro a contract written in careful calligraphy. It promises his daughter will learn music, dance, and refinement. It promises she will be well-fed and clothed. It conveniently does not mention the debt accrual system, how every meal, every piece of clothing, every lesson would be charged against her earnings, ensuring that by the time a girl reached 20, she might still owe more than she had ever earned. The government sanctioned this without hesitation. Laws explicitly permitted the practice, setting only minimal restrictions. An apprentice could be indentured as young as 13 in some regions, sometimes younger. The contract was enforceable, and those who attempted escape faced consequences. If an apprentice ran away, police were obligated to pursue her. The legal system protected the house's property rights in her labor far more reliably than it protected her basic human dignity. Religion layered another justification onto this structure. Buddhism taught the concept of karma, The idea that suffering in this life was payment for misdeeds in a previous existence. An apprentice who was sold was, in this framework, simply experiencing her deserved fate. More subtly, the aesthetic tradition of the geisha was built on Zen concepts of beauty through discipline and self-denial. The suffering was reframed as artistic purification, necessary to produce transcendent beauty. To endure pain gracefully was to achieve refinement. The brilliance of the system lay in how it weaponized language and classification. Geisha were officially labeled as artists and entertainers, not servants, not slaves, but occupying a carefully constructed legal category that fell somewhere between property and personhood. This ambiguous status allowed society to maintain a comforting fiction, that these were consenting professionals pursuing an art form. In reality, the law had deliberately designed this category to deny them legal protections while preserving the power to exploit them completely. What the state had created was a cage disguised as a career. And so the machine hummed along, generation after generation, turning desperate rural families into suppliers of young bodies, house mothers into managers of confinement, and an entire society into passive witnesses who chose to see artistry where slavery actually stood. The day begins before dawn. At 5 o'clock, a bell, old, cracked, metallic, rings from somewhere deeper in the building. Tomoe's eyes snap open, even though she has not slept. Sleep in the geisha house comes in fragments, interrupted by the sounds of men's laughter from the floors below, the shuffling of other apprentices moving through darkness, and her own racing mind. She has been here for 2 months now. She still does not know the names of all the other trainees, and more importantly, they are not encouraged to befriend each other. Isolation is policy. She shares a room with 3 other apprentices: Hana, age 16, Yuki, age 15, and Kimiko, age 13. Kimiko arrived 3 weeks ago. She still cries at night, though she tries to hide the sound by burying her face in the thin blanket. When Tomoe once reached over to comfort her, the house mother appeared at the door within seconds, as if she had been listening just beyond the wall, and both apprentices were beaten for unauthorized intimacy. The message was clear. Your suffering is yours alone to bear. Breakfast is rice gruel and pickled vegetables, the same every morning. The portions are carefully measured. A trainee who gains too much weight is fed less. One who grows too thin is given only water until she eats faster. The goal is visible ribs beneath pale skin, a fashionable fragility that signals both purity and control. Next to the breakfast bowls sits a list of rules, rewritten daily by the house mother in her neat hand. This morning it reads, no speaking during meals, no scratching or adjustment of clothing, no contact with the other apprentices. Lesson begins at 6. Punishment for tardiness, no dinner. The apprentice called Hana, the oldest in their room, has developed a technique for resistance that is so subtle the house mother cannot quite punish it. She hums. Not loudly, but just audibly enough that it irritates the older woman. It is a song from her village, a folk melody that reminds her of her mother. Humming violates no written rule, but Hana is beaten for it anyway, accused of inappropriate behavior and mental indiscipline. Still, she hums again the next day. For Tomoe, watching this tiny rebellion is both inspiring and terrifying. It confirms that one can refuse, even silently. It also shows the cost of refusal. The training itself is designed to be both physically punishing and psychologically degrading. Shamisen lessons require hours of the same gesture repeated until the fingers bleed. Dance instruction involves the instructor striking an apprentice's limbs with a wooden rod to correct posture. Not correcting through demonstration, but correcting through pain, the body learning to associate beauty with agony. Every trainee must learn to smile while screaming inside. Propriety classes teach how to walk, sit, and kneel in ways that display the body as desirable while maintaining an expression of serene indifference. One must perform availability while appearing untouchable. At noon, Tomoe's hair is styled for the first time. The house mother braids it, weaving in ornamental combs and flowers, the kind of elaborate arrangement that requires 2 hours and inflicts constant tension on the scalp. The process is as much punishment as preparation. The mother explains, while braiding, that Tomoe's body is no longer her own. Every inch of you belongs to this house. Your hair, your skin, your voice. These are not decorations for you to enjoy. They are merchandise. You are a vessel. Your feelings are irrelevant. She pulls the hair tighter. Tomoe's eyes water, but she is forbidden to cry. By evening, exhaustion has replaced fear as the dominant sensation. The apprentices line up for inspection, a daily ritual where the house mother examines them for cleanliness, weight, and compliance. She looks at their hands for cuts, their eyes for spirit, their posture. Kimiko fails inspection because her hands shake. She is sent to bed without eating. No one protests. Protest would only extend her punishment to include them. In the darkness of the shared room, Tomoe lies awake, as always, feeling the weight of the tatami mat beneath her, hearing Kimiko's breathing finally deepen into sleep. She thinks of her mother, but this thought is becoming harder. The house has renamed her. She is no longer Tomoe of the mountain village. She is Tomoe of the House of Beauty, and the woman she was is slowly being erased, not dramatically, but grain by grain, like sand rubbed away by endless waves. In 6 months, there will be nothing left of her former self to remember. And perhaps, she thinks in the moments before exhaustion finally pulls her under, that will be a mercy. By Tomoe's 16th birthday, she has been in the Geisha house for 2 years. She has mastered the shamisen and the dance of the spring maple. She can pour sake with perfect grace. She knows how to smile without smiling, to seem available while remaining remote. She has also endured something that the house calls mizuage, a practice for which there is no innocent translation. What began as a coming-of-age ritual in medieval Japan had, by the modern era, become a system of ritualized violation, euphemistically described as her deflowering, or formal introduction to adult responsibilities. The mizuage was not a single event, but a process. Wealthy patrons, government officials, wealthy merchants, kabuki actors would bid for the right to be the apprentice's first client. This was presented to Tomoe as an honor. The house mother explained it in the language of tradition and beauty. You have become a true geisha. Now you must fulfill your purpose. The man who wins your mizuage is bringing you recognition. You should be grateful. There was no mention of consent because the concept was irrelevant. Tomoe had no legal standing to refuse. She was a contracted asset. The night arrives. Tomoe is bathed, dressed in a silk kimono so expensive that the price will be added to her debt, and brought to a room in a private establishment connected to the geisha house. The man waiting for her is in his 50s, a government bureaucrat she has never met. The house mother leaves. The door is locked. What happens in that room is the cruelest part of the system because it combines physical violation with psychological warfare. The apprentice is told that her pain is beauty, her trauma is tradition, her exploitation is privilege. When Tomoe returns the next morning, she is told to smile and act grateful. She is forbidden to speak of what happened. The house mother inspects her for evidence of proper behavior and takes the payment, which is recorded as a debt that Tomoe will work to repay. Except the repayment is mathematically impossible. New clients will follow, perhaps one per week, perhaps several. Each transaction increases her debt. The system is designed so that the deeper she sinks into compliance, the more trapped she becomes. 6 months pass. Hannah's earlier humming has evolved into open defiance. She begins to refuse clients. She stops eating, makes herself ill, claims injuries that render her unable to receive guests. The house mother responds with calculated cruelty. Hannah is confined to the smallest room, given only water, beaten daily. Other apprentices are forbidden from acknowledging her existence. To speak to her is to invite the same punishment. After 3 months of isolation, Hannah capitulates. She stops resisting and begins to smile again. But something crucial is dead in her eyes. The resistance broke her more completely than force ever could have. Tomoe witnesses this transformation and feels something shift inside her. She understands now that the system does not need to be maintained by constant violence. It needs only the threat of violence, the certainty that any resistance will result in something worse than compliance, and the absolute isolation of each apprentice so that no collective resistance is possible. The genius of the system lies in this. It makes the victim choose her own cage. Years pass in this manner. Tomoe turns 18, then 20. She is no longer an apprentice. She is now a working geisha, an asset of considerable value to the house. She entertains clients, earns money that is recorded but never reaches her hands, and watches younger trainees arrive with the same confusion and terror that she once felt. The Mizuage system continues, each apprentice believing her exploitation is somehow different, somehow more justified than the last. There are moments when Tomoe, in the privacy of her mind, wonders what resistance would look like. Where would she go? Her family has disowned her, there is no going home. The police would return her, the law would side with the house. And so she continues, becoming expert at her art, smiling through her numbness, and slowly accepting the narrative that this is simply the price of beauty, the cost of a woman's existence in a world that has decided her value long before she could speak. By the early 20th century, the geisha system had not gone unnoticed by reformers and government critics. In 1872, Japan had already begun modernizing its laws under Western influence, yet the geisha system persisted, even expanded. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. Here was a nation trying to prove itself civilized to the Western world, yet maintaining what Western observers openly called slavery. Japanese journalists and social reformers began publishing exposés. In 1913, a prominent writer named Yamada Waka, herself a former courtesan who had escaped the system, published a widely read account of her experiences. It scandalized Tokyo's intellectual circles. Debates erupted in Parliament about whether the government should ban the practice. Some members argued that the Mizuage system was a national embarrassment that damaged Japan's reputation abroad. Others countered that it was tradition, that girls entered the system willingly through family contracts, and that banning it would be foreign interference in Japanese culture. A partial reform came in 1900. A law was passed that officially prohibited the sale of girls under 13 into indentured servitude. It was celebrated as progress. In reality, it was nearly meaningless. The age was simply raised to 14 or 15. The debt bondage system continued unchanged. Contracts were rewritten, but their substance remained identical. The law created the appearance of reform without dismantling the system itself. It was designed to appease international critics while leaving the machinery intact. More significant was a legal shift in 1911 and again in amendments through the 1920s and 1930s. A girl could now, theoretically, leave her contract if she could repay her debt in full. But here lay the trap. The debt was specifically constructed to be unpayable. A girl's earnings were deliberately set lower than the costs charged against her. A girl could work for 10 years and still owe money for meals consumed, kimonos worn, and lessons received. The law was designed to look progressive while being absolutely impractical for the girl to use. The police occasionally raided illegal geisha houses, establishments that operated outside formal regulation, and their records document the conditions found. But these raids targeted only the worst-case scenarios, the houses that operated in gray zones of the law. The legitimate geisha houses, the ones that had secured government licenses and operated within the margins of legality, were largely untouched. The system bifurcated. Public-facing, licensed establishments could claim respectability, while semi-legal operations absorbed the worst abuses, protected by corruption and willful ignorance. What is crucial to understand is that very few girls were ever actually freed by these legal reforms. The statistics are stark. Between 1900 and 1945, fewer than 5% of indentured geishas were able to escape through official channels. The rest either aged out of the system, becoming house mothers themselves, perpetuating the cycle, or simply died. Some succumbed to disease, others to violence, some to the slow erasure of self that comes from years of violation. The response of broader Japanese society was silence. While Tomoe and thousands like her endured their confinement, the art world celebrated geisha culture as a pinnacle of aesthetic refinement. Poetry societies composed verses about their grace. Wealthy men competed for their company. Theater productions romanticized their elegance. The disconnect was absolute. The nation publicly venerated a system it privately knew was predatory, and the law had been carefully written to maintain this comfortable fiction. This is where we come back to Tomoe. By 1935, she was 35 years old. She had survived 20 years in the geisha system, something that many did not. She was no longer sought by wealthy clients. Her face had aged, her hands bore the scars of shamisen strings, her body carried the weight of invisible trauma. The house mother dismissed her. She was given a small sum of money, far less than she had generated in her lifetime, and told she was free to leave. She had no skills outside the geisha world. She had no family connections. She was, to society, a woman who no longer had value because her youth, the only quality that had ever been recognized as valuable, had simply expired. What becomes clear from Tomoe's life, and from the tens of thousands like her, is this. The system was never about creating beauty, despite what the culture claimed. The beauty was only the marketing. The actual purpose was threefold: the domination of female sexuality, the extraction of her labor, and the commodification of her body as merchandise. The elaborate aesthetic framework, the art, the tradition, the refinement, was the language used to justify something fundamentally predatory. And perhaps the most chilling realization is how normalized it all was. This was not hidden in basement cells or concealed from society. This happened in plain sight. Tourists could see the geisha walking through Kyoto's lantern-lit streets, painted and perfumed and beautiful. They saw art and mystery and the romantic East. They did not see Tomoe's hunger, Hana's broken resistance, or Kimiko's terror. The system was designed so you could witness it and see exactly what you wanted to see. The geisha culture that still exists today in Japan has changed, reformed, and distanced itself from the worst abuses of its past. But the architecture of that past remains visible if you know where to look. The narrow geisha houses still stand in Kyoto, Osaka, and Tokyo, physical monuments to a system of confinement. Tourists photograph them, paint them in watercolors, celebrate them as repositories of Japanese tradition. They walk over the same wooden floors where Tomoe's fear vibrated in the darkness. The system is gone, but the buildings remember. Here is the deeper truth. Civilization is not measured by what it creates. It is measured by what it tolerates, what it hides, and how it treats those with no power to resist. Tomoe had no power. Tens of thousands of girls had no power. Society had the power and chose silence. The law had the power and chose narrow reform instead of abolition. Culture had the power to honor beauty at any cost and chose not to question that cost. So when you see a photograph of a geisha in traditional dress, or visit a temple in Kyoto, or read a romanticized account of this world, ask yourself, do we still do this? Not in the same form, perhaps, but do we still take the young and powerless and extract their value while calling it opportunity? Do we still build systems of control and call them tradition? Do we still choose not to see? If these stories shouldn't be forgotten, if you believe that uncomfortable truths matter more than comforting myths, then subscribe. These voices exist only if we insist they do. Tomoe's silence was imposed. Ours would be chosen.